volume for people. And I want to start by echoing, I think, Jocelyn's thanks to Mass and the group for running this. This is just excellent and great to be in the room here with all of you engaged citizens today. You heard that I did a bit of work at the CRD. I spent some time there, and one of the highlights from my time at the regional district was helping Salt Spring Island through a process of making a decision around whether it wanted to incorporate as its own municipality or stay as part of the regional district. And it involved a similar process with a technical study, a group, a committee that helped the community through presentation of that material, and ended ultimately in a referendum. And that referendum was ultimately to stay the same, and it was a status quo decision. So a lot of work, time, effort, energy went into that process to an end result, which was a status quo result. I think and this came up in one of the questions at the beginning, so I thought I'd just quickly address that. I think that process in and of itself was of tremendous value to the community, notwithstanding the result, which stayed the same at the end of it. And it was tremendous value to the organization in terms of better understanding of the services that were provided through the regional district model and what could be provided through something that was envisioned. So just want to provide that as a bit of encouragement to the group as you move through your task, not obviously prejudging what the result here will be, but just how I felt, how powerful that process was. And I think those that were involved in it had a similar feeling at Salt Spring. So I want to thank Peter. I want to thank Ted and Jocelyn. Jocelyn mentioned that our staff and work closely together. We've done so, and I'll hit one of the questions head on too, rather than launching into the presentation. And that was around why did it take so long to get to the plebiscite to now? And there's, I think, a lot of reasons for that. But staff have worked closely since that plebiscite back in 2018 to try to advance the work related to setting up this assembly to where we got to today. I'll just really highlight two areas I think that I think were quite important for some of that delay. One was on the budget side. These take time, energy, investment. We all have full-time jobs, and then our staff that are feeding into this process are now doing it off the sides of their desk. So we needed to fund it. Victoria made a contribution. Saanich was able to make a contribution, $250,000 to the process. And both organizations were looking to the province to also make a similar contribution so that we could really fund the work properly and envision a process that was fully funded and whole like it is today. The province did come to the table and also provided equal funding, but that took a long time to wend its way through a series of discussions, budget meetings, and also provincial approval, which ultimately goes up through cabinet. The second thing, and this is everyone's excuse for everything now, my kids all the time, COVID, that happened, and it was a big interruption in our lives, and also a big interruption you heard Jocelyn speak about it in the budget impact. It was also a big interruption in terms of the process to get moving. I recall there might have been some conversation with Peter at the time about, how do we play this in this period? And the answer was, well, this doesn't really work. And Peter, I'm paraphrasing you so you can correct it later, but this doesn't really work in a pandemic setting. People need to come together to do the work of a deliberative assembly. And so that was also part of the conversation and part of the reason for delay. I do have Angela Baines, who's our corporate officer and director of legislative and protective services here. She's about to escape, but before she does so, I'm just going to ask her if there's anything else on that point that you want to add. That's great. Now you can go. Yeah. No, thank you for that, Angela. And I'm just going to also call up Chris Coates. Maybe just wave Chris. Chris used to be the corporate officer. Chris has held a range of senior roles in local governments, and I won't go through his elaborate history, but he's had the distinct privilege of working both at a senior level in Victoria, and now he's recently at Oak Bay, but now he's helping us on the Saanich side with coordinating some of our information flow. Chris, do you have anything to add to that? Because Chris was actually working with Angela when he was in Victoria, and now is working with Angela in Saanich. Anything else to add, Chris?
No.
Thanks, Chris. I think that answers the first question. I'll launch in. I'll try to be a bit quicker. Jocelyn did a great job in the presentation, and I think she touched on several themes I think that are common to both municipalities, really our region, and probably municipalities across the country. So she set the table well, so I don't have to get into I think all of the detail that she presented, because a lot of it is really similar at the Saanich level. And you'll hear from MMP later today. I made one comment about our staff, and just wanted to thank our staff broadly for the work they're doing at feeding information up into this process. They've worked closely with MMP over the summertime to really provide the necessary information into the technical study. So it takes actually many people to keep the information flowing, and the back end amount of work that goes into this is very significant. I see Jocelyn nodding her head. Our staff are doing a lot of work in addition to their regular jobs to help support this process, and I'm quite proud of that. I know Jocelyn is too. And I don't say that to sort of come across as whiny, but just to really recognize it at the front end, and it's really I think hopefully to the credit of our organizations to support the work that you're doing. So I wanted to say that at the front end. There's been territorial acknowledgements. Won't echo those with too much time, aside from the fact that Saanich does our work largely on the territory of the Saanich people. There's also an area of overlapping claims. Our name is derived from the Saanich-speaking peoples, and we're quite proud of that, and continuing to foster great relationships with our Indigenous neighbours and urban Indigenous that live within Saanich. So getting into some of the content, I'm not going to go into the demographics in detail. You have that in your information. I've also linked our economic development page there, which has a really, if you go to that when you have some time, it's a really up-to-date and great way that presents some of this information in graphical form about our community, the nature of our community, and how it's made up. The highlights were over 125,000 people. Median age is 44.4%. So I think a little younger than the CRD average, but a little older than the municipal or the provincial average, which is about 42 years old. Sets out our education levels. 43% have a bachelor's degree, 13% master's or higher, and then there's 72% that have a range of post-secondary certificates, degrees, or designations. Our median income is $48,000 for an individual and about $100,000 for a household. You'll see our ethnic breakup there, with currently 71.5% claiming broad European ancestry. This is just a real quick snapshot of our municipal economy. I think it's just common sense for everyone in the room that one of the key distinctions between Saanich and Victoria is the fact that Victoria is a downtown urban environment. Saanich is largely suburban, and probably you can use the term bedroom community, but originated as a bit more of a rural and suburban community to feed into the urban area, which is Victoria. So that's reflected, I think, in some of our economic information and also the economies of our area. I've highlighted just a few here in terms of the top major industries, being sales, business and finance, government services, and then also a table that highlights the employment by the sectors within Saanich. At the top of that is healthcare, social assistance, public administration. Educational services is also on there. Saanich has Camosun College, both campuses, pieces of it within our municipality. The University of Victoria, a portion of that is within Saanich. So a lot of, and over at the Tech Park, UVic owns and operates the Technology Park, which is behind Lay Ritz Park in Saanich. So a lot of educational components in Saanich to our economy. In 2024, January, so this year, we recently adopted our first economic development plan for Saanich. So that's a big new space that we're moving into. Our OCP is based on sustainable Saanich, we call it, and 3 sustainability pillars, which are looking at social well-being, economic vibrancy, and protection of the environment. Those are the 3 legs of the stool on which all of our policy framework is built. And it's really critical that we also focus on the economic leg, because I think historically in Saanich, we haven't supported that at an organizational level to the same level that you maybe see in Victoria or more urban centers. So it's really a roadmap for us to grow an economic vision for Saanich. I see a question already. Economic, social, and environmental. So it makes up the sustainable framework that pretty much infiltrates everything that we articulate in our official community plan, which is our overarching policy document. Staffing overview, so similar size to Victoria, a bit larger in terms of total staffing. We have just over 1,600 total staff. Our full-time complement is just under 800 people, a part-time of about 121. And our casual temp staff are about 745. A lot of that flows from the large recreation service that we provide to the region. We have 4 major rec centers in Saanich, and we have a lot of casual staff that support our rec facilities. Lifeguard is sort of one key job that you'll all relate to, but that's mostly in the casual temp category in Saanich. A broad, high-level sketching of our organizational structure. We have, I won't reiterate Jocelyn's comments on the role of the city manager or the chief administrative officer. I think it's really just a semantic distinction in terms of the title. We really do the same thing in our organizations. Responsible for all of our staff and delivering all of the programs for the organization. We have the key departments listed below. They all have a department head. Those department heads report to me, and we meet regularly to govern the organization internally, but also to provide business up to council, who provides that overarching governance and policy direction for the organization. We have a corporate services department. That department's made up of key functions like human resources, occupational health and safety, corporate communications. It also includes our sustainability division as well as our economic development function. Our engineering group, it's our largest staff group. It makes up about 50% of our organization in terms of the staffing component. That includes our public works groups that work on roads, sewers, water, drainage, curb and gutter and sidewalk work. In addition to our transportation planning division, they do development review as it relates to planning. And they also manage our asset management program, which is a relatively new function within Saanich. Finance group, they manage all things related to finance support council's budget process. They also deal with revenue, the money that comes in, payroll expenses that go out, and maintaining some of our key software pieces that help us manage a large organization of 1,600 people. Fire suppression emergency preparedness program. We also have fire dispatch at Saanich, which is one of the distinctive things that our fire service provides. So we have a call center that takes in 911 calls and then dispatches them to clients. So we serve about 200,000 residents in terms of that client makeup. And a number of communities throughout the Gulf Islands, as well as locally here in the CRD. A lot of municipalities that don't use our services use Surrey, which is another major provider of 911 dispatch services for fire. Information technology, that's a group that has 6 divisions. It provides support to the 1,600 people we have working for us. This is one key area, I would say, organizationally, where we have challenge and opportunity. I see it as one of the main areas for us to increase in efficiency over time in respect to all of our services. AI is getting all the press right now, but it is going to be socially impactful. It's going to be very impactful to the way that our staff do our work. There's some communities like Kelowna that are out ahead that use AI integrated to a lot of their processes already. We're really ramping up in this space and really trying to set the table for our staff to deliver in this area, because we see the importance that it's going to provide into the future. Our groups are quite aligned. I see with Ted and with Jocelyn in terms of looking at solutions to drive innovation in the local government sectors, and I think that's going to only continue. Legislative and protective services, you saw Angela here. They support council in terms of the governance and council process on the legislative side. They also provide some of our key regulatory programs like building inspection, bylaw enforcement, business licensing. They run our risk program, which is our insurance program. I think that's the bulk of it for LPS. Planning, community planning, and current planning. So that's the way we divide it in Saanich. Community planning is the group that sets a lot of our policy frameworks. So they do policy development about what our community should look like. Current planning is the group that's responsible for reviewing, taking in development applications and making recommendations to council about those development applications. So those are the two key groups as part of our planning department. And then finally, Parks, Recreation, and Community Services. That's also a very large group within Saanich. They provide all of the park services that support our 172 parks in Saanich, which is quite significant. But they also have a community services group that engages in a range of community programs, as well as now our environmental services group that oversees our environmental policy framework in Saanich. Just quick slide. You can look at it later. It shows some of the buckets that go to those various areas that I just outlined based on a hypothetical tax and utility payment of just over $5,000. So you see some of the buckets there identified, and you can go through that in your slide, although it's probably quite small, but really just has a breakdown of where those tax dollars go in relation to those program areas. But I won't just to stay on task, skip through this. I wanted to, Jocelyn indicated what makes Victoria, and she wove it through her presentation, a bit distinctive. This is just a few thoughts from me about what makes Saanich distinctive in terms of the work that we do and the way that we provide our services. First, parks. We have a big park network. There's 172 parks. Signature parks are Beckwith, Cadborough, Gyro, Cuthbert Homes, the Gorge Waterway, Picoles, Mount Doug, Mount Tommy, Cedar Hill, Playfair, Prospect Lake, and Swan Lake. So some big sort of geographic parks within Saanich. The next bullet's environmental protection and sustainability. A lot of municipalities are doing good work in this space. We've engaged in this work for a long time in Saanich, and we recently passed a biodiversity conservation strategy and an urban forestry strategy, which really seek to steward our natural assets in a bit of a different way. And it's really a focal point of a lot of the work that council does, a lot of what we hear from residents, and a lot of the policy framework that staff apply in doing their work. Noted the climate plan. Victoria is out ahead on this too in terms of the sustainability work they're doing to reduce GHGs, not only within our corporate organizations and the work we're doing with our fleets and everything else, but also in the community and trying to incent the lowering and reduction of GHGs to the betterment of our natural environment and climate. I've noted the urban-rural split. That's critical, I think, for me in Saanich, and we'll get to the map later. But really, half of our municipality is in rural Saanich, so it's not even suburban. It's outside what we call the urban containment boundary, which is a key policy boundary in Saanich, where council has declared nothing outside of this is going to be subject to development in the same way that it is in urban Saanich. That's also a key reflection in the RGS, which is a planning document that goes through Ted's group at the CRD, which looks at how we plan regionally as a whole. So that urban containment boundary is also reflected in the regional growth strategy that goes through the CRD. I don't have the number. I can follow up with that, but you're right. Our population growth is centered in the urban area, and that's only going to increase because our planning framework has the growth continuing to happen in urban Saanich and not in rural Saanich. But I can try to follow up with those numbers. Small. I've noted recreation, and I'm talking fast, and Peter just gave me the 10, I think that was the 10-minute, Peter, is that right? Jocelyn, me and Ted, we could talk about this all day, so it's very interesting, but recreation, we have full-service community recreation centers, Cedar Hill, GR Perks, Commonwealth, and Gordon Head, and we also have a golf course, which is fairly rare now in BC. There's some others, but Cedar Hill is a beloved course and hard to get a tee time these days, so I hear. Fire service, I've already noted we provide dispatch services, which makes us a bit unique in terms of the infrastructure we provide. Yeah.
You mentioned you provide fire service and police service dispatch from multiple other communities. Is Victoria one or no?
Victoria uses Surrey for fire dispatch. We don't actually provide police dispatch 911. That goes through TED and the CRD. So the CRD has established recently a service to provide emergency dispatch response for police. And they have a building located in Saanich for which they do that out of. We do the fire side, but Victoria participates through Surrey currently.
Why police from
It kind of predates me. I don't know if, Jocelyn, that was why did you choose Surrey? We have procurement processes, and there's some history that goes into that in terms of timing. Jocelyn, any comments on that? Yeah, I think it's a good, candid answer. I mean, cooperation regionally, it ebbs and flows in terms of what we can provide to our regional partners. Go ahead, Jocelyn. Yeah, an interesting governance conversation as well. That was it in terms of distinctiveness. Infrastructure overview. We have just recently gone down the path of more rigorous asset management planning in Saanich, and this is, I think municipalities are taking this up more and more as time goes on, because we need to understand the scope of the assets that we steward. We see in this first wheel here that our total replacement value for all of our assets is in the 5 billion range. We think that's low, and there's assets that we haven't fully brought into scope. But you can see the breakdown on the slides, bulk of them being wastewater, which makes up 21%, transportation, which makes up 30%. That's roads, road base, and all of that infrastructure, and some other big numbers there as well. You can see the physical condition wheel. This is just generally relates to all of those. We have an asset management plan that breaks these down into further detail. But generally speaking, I think the average is fair across the district. I've highlighted facilities on the next slide because I think it's interesting, and it's where we're doing a lot of work right now. On the right there lists some of our facilities. We have about 74 municipal facilities. And when I say facilities, I mean buildings of some variety, and another big bulk of parks buildings that aren't included in that number. And some of them rank very poor. So that's the red category in the 15%. Very few of them rank very good. Some of them are good. On the far right there, it gives a list of some of those facilities that you'll note. Those ones that we have ranked through that screening process as very poor. The Parks and Public Works Yard, that's at Mackenzie and Borden. It's called our Saanich Operations Center. We've embarked in a program to replace that facility. It's been on the books for a long time, but very hard to advance because of the size and scope. That project's in the $174 million range, and we're just advancing that project through to really kicking it off with the private sector and the process that we've established for that. Fire Hall 2 is another very poor facility. It's in the middle of a complete rebuild. Unfortunately, because of some of the escalated costs that Jocelyn alluded to in the external construction environment, our costs went up quite a bit in terms of when we first conceived that project and when it started. It's midway right now. I think they've poured foundation and they're advancing the project quite rapidly, but it's in the $44 million range. And then police is the last one noted there, and there hasn't been any active work right now on upgrading our police facilities, which are very poor. They're located centrally at the campus that you see at 77770 Vernon Avenue, right by the Municipal Hall. And then you have a category of buildings that are listed as poor, including the Municipal Hall, and some that we've identified and list as good. Really just this puts in context, I think, some of the financial pressures that are facing municipalities and I think this goes across all municipalities in the CRD and through the province. All of this infrastructure was built out 50, 60, not all of it, but largely years ago. We don't have adequate reserves to pay for it. So that's one way, whether you're a strata corporation or a municipality, that you can save for the future is put money aside to pay for that asset when it needs replacement or repair. We don't have reserves to cover the costs. So that's a major issue for us as an organization as it relates to ongoing financial sustainability of our operation and our assets, because these are essential facilities that will support delivery of what I would call core municipal infrastructure, like traditional core municipal infrastructure, like the road, sewer, water, and everything that most residents take for granted. I see a hand.
How many of these ratings are poor are are they physically poor, or are they things that survive?
There's a combination, and that's one factor that went into our facilities master plan. That plan is available on our website and provides a really rigorous sort of detail in terms of how the rankings of the facilities occurred. That's available on our website. I think you can take a look at that. I think some of them are just poor. If you went to our Saanich operation, I got the 5-minute mark. Saanich Operations Center, rat-infested trailers, barely functional office space. Old trailers that are double stacked. I think anyone that sort of would do a walkthrough of the facilities in terms of where our professional staff are expected to work would say this is not adequate. So there's a mix. Active transportation and transportation. I've just put some stats up there about the kilometers of road and bike lane. 600 kilometers of road, 260 or 70 kilometers of sidewalks, about half of Victoria. We don't have a ton of sidewalk in our suburban municipality. And again, draw you back to the rural-urban split. A lot of our road network is rural. So those roads are maintained at a different level than urban roads. So just interesting to note. I've noted our active transportation plan, our road safety action plan, which are key policy documents. Important key partners, province of BC, MOTI, BC Transit, which maintains and runs our transit system. Our staff work in close collaboration, as Jocelyn outlined, and the CRD. Mentioned the transportation service briefly, but they also provide key support through their transportation group into a lot of our planning that we do regionally. And also, of course, the great trail we have running through the Lochside Trail and the Galloping Goose Trail, which is a CRD facility. Yes?
Does your transportation plan include getting more sidewalks in whenever the road gets repaved?
Yes. Not necessarily whenever it gets paved, because sometimes it's just a simple paving project. Yeah, when it gets redone. Yeah, we have our active transportation plan is a roadmap for the future that allows us to make sort of rational and policy-based decisions about how we build out our road network, so it becomes less of a knee-jerk kind of reaction to maybe an accident or community lobbying. And so that is all covered in that road safety action plan about how we intend to build out our road network to get to what we call Vision Zero. Council's adopted Vision Zero as a policy statement, which basically says we want no deaths on our road infrastructure in Saanich. There's policy aspects to that. There's infrastructure aspects to that. Policing, you can see it on the slide. We don't have oversight. I don't have oversight of police. I don't work with police in terms of the day-to-day operations. We have our municipal council that governs us. We have a police board that governs the police. So they are actually a separate employer of Saanich Police. And they have a police chief that reports up to the police board. That police chief doesn't report to me. That police chief is part of our leadership team and functions along with us to govern some of our internal policy. But there's no direct reporting relationship. And I just wanted to clarify that with everyone. 185 police officer positions, 60 civilians, and they have a range of different divisions. Yeah, it's a bit messier with the Esquimalt. They have also some of joint representation there, but it's the similar model. That model is legislated. Our mayor is chair of the police board. The legislation was recently changed so that to allow councils to appoint someone other than the mayor as chair of the police board, but our mayor remains chair of the police board. So that's the overlap between the police side and the council side. The council has budget approval of the police operations. So that's our main interaction with police.
I know this isn't sort of your department, but I noticed that the policing per capita in Saanich is way lower than the number of officers. Do you know what happened?
The number of officers? Yeah, it is. I mean, they probably the urban nature of policing, I think, and some of the issues that Jocelyn alluded to. I don't know and I don't have the number of per capita policing in terms of how many police officers you have per resident. I know I can get that information, but I don't know what that will look like as between us and Victoria, but probably double the staff, I think. Yeah, yeah, and I did want to flag here too that we have a lot of integrated police work that's going on in our region and even beyond our region. And I'll just quickly rattle off all of the work that our group is involved with that transcends or goes across our municipal borders. We have the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit in BC, Crime Stoppers, Crowd Management Unit, the Greater Victoria Emergency Response Team, the Integrated Canine Response Team, the Integrated National Security Enforcement Team, the Integrated Road Safety Unit, the Mobile Youth Service Team, the Regional Domestic Violence Unit, and the Vancouver Island Integrated Major Crime Unit. So a lot of work that goes on cross municipal boundaries, which highlights, I think, the range of collaboration that already occurs in this space when we talk about efficiencies and working together cross regionally. Oh, I'm stuck on the spine. We work together in that, yeah.
But who owns the employees?
We all do respectively. So Saanich employees are owned by our police board and funded by Saanich Council. Same with Victoria.
No, I meant if you're like person, who owns them? Or does every municipality own a portion of it?
Well, they provide, pursuant to the arrangements that they have through MOU or otherwise, a certain number of staff from each jurisdiction to make up that complement. And then there's a structure that goes with every one of those integrated units about decision-making and tactical decision-making. We also provide some police services to Oak Bay through Saanich, and that's through a service agreement. I'm not going to go detail into planning because you'll see that in the future, trying to save some time. I think the map is interesting because the question came up. Gray is rural. White is urban. We're really trying to focus in our new OCP that was adopted this year on putting density where it should be, and that's corridor centers and villages. So you'll see the corridors are yellow, centers are kind of pink and red, and the villages are a bit of that beige color, I guess I would say. In terms of that northern boundary, here it is. If you drive on the Pat Bay Highway just past Elk Lake, before Tanner Road, before Keating, where the new flyway is being constructed, that's where the boundary is. Look for the tiny little Saanich green sign on the highway. You'll see it if you look for it. And then, of course, if you go off onto the West Saanich side, so 17A, the boundary jogs a bit, and it's not quite so simple. And if you go up Willis Point Road up into Durant's Lake area, that actually becomes CRD electoral area property out past Durant's Lake and along that little Mark Lane that you see at the top. So the CRD still has a portion of that out by the landfill. Yes, yeah. Yeah, we have, Saanich has local area plans that were developed over time in concert with community. Those don't currently form part of our OCP, but they're still policy documents that guide a lot of different policy areas. We have a local area plan for rural Saanich, and that sets out a whole range of things in relation to transportation, use of trails and parks, and land use planning as well. So the answer is yes. Those are available on our website as well, and our planner can speak to that in more detail when she comes at a future time. Good question. I don't have that stat here, but I can get that back to Peter in terms of the percentage of area and ALR. That's a key sort of distinction here because of the rural nature of Saanich. We have a lot of agricultural planning that we do as well. We have an agricultural strategy, food security strategy that seeks to develop policies specific to those areas in addition. But there's a substantial portion of that is ALR. All of the land you see that's in gray that's not in the ALR is A zone. So it's agriculturally, well, not all. There's some anomalies, but most of it is A zone. So agriculturally zoned property. Budget. So I don't have percentage increase slides for you, and these are a bit complicated, but what I did is really just cut and pasted it from our budget bylaw. We're required by law, municipalities, to have a 5-year financial plan, so we have to do this. We also can't, and I think it's just of interest because of the day we're on today and deficit discussion that's happened over the past couple of weeks, we can't maintain a deficit. So we have to spend what we budget for. You'll see our rolling 5-year number. The operating purposes number is probably the one that's of interest. This 2024, just over 224 million. 2028, that number goes up to 266 million. But there's a series of assumptions that go into that number, and most of those assumptions are that things will stay exactly the same. So we all know that doesn't happen. There's increases, other areas, other pressures, staff added, and those types of things. So it's not necessarily a percentage increase slide like Jocelyn presented. This is really just the amount of money that has to sustain our operations. And this is on the capital side, same deal. This is really the number to zero in on that funds our capital program, 191 million today, and it levels off, but then bumps back up. The reason it's 191 for 2024 is that because it includes carryover capital, which is all of the projects that we can't get to in a given year are still retained in this year's budget. If we spend it all and if our crews do all the work, it'll evaporate back down to that 80 some odd million figure in the future. If we can't get to the work, that number will roll over and our capital program will continue to roll that number forward. Just to boil it right down, the two main buckets for us are capital and operating. All of our day-to-day operations are funded out of that operating budget on the previous slide. All of our capital operations, which involve all the upgrades to our water, sewer, roads, all of the facilities work we do are funded from our capital budget. And that's a key distinction. No, it's not big because of the fire hall. We funded some of that from a facilities reserve. We emptied down our facilities reserve to fund that. And the remainder of that is actually funded by borrowing. So it doesn't come right out of our, and that's a strategy we use. We use borrowing so that we don't have huge spikes in our annual tax lift. So rather than taxing everyone to raise the money, we borrow, which is cheaper, and spread the payments over time. But most of the fire hall is borrowed. It's really just you can't get to certain core work, and that carries over from the previous year. And I can't get into all of the specifics around that capital program. I'm probably way over, Peter. Can I spend a minute on issues? Okay, I'll just talk about issues because they're similar, I think, to what Jocelyn mentioned. I would say affordability in housing. I'm not making that up because, like Jocelyn, we have a citizen and business survey that we've done every 3 to 4 years since 2003. And the results of that survey said it was affordability and transportation infrastructure came in second to that. I think that's something that you'll see reflected in the vital signs discussion for people that have followed that. Those are really the top two things that concern the whole region. We also have a strategic plan. That's the plan that council sets out once they got elected, where they came in and said, this is what we want to tackle collectively as a group in our council term. That strategic plan really reflects what they heard on the campaign trail, what they hear from being out in community, and they identified these areas as areas of importance to our municipality. And in our plan, we have a series of objectives and then initiatives to try to advance work under each of these buckets in Saanich. Climate action, environmental leadership, community well-being, which includes a lot of different things, housing, transportation, economic development, and organizational excellence. For me, I would say if I had to pick one thing as the administrator and internal facing is really just the overall financial sustainability of our operations. We have a lot of work to do, a lot of work that keeps coming our way through things like housing targets and policy shifts by senior levels of government. We have to be nimble, we have to be responsive to our residents. And we don't have a lot of money with which to do that. And as Jocelyn indicated, a lack of tools that enable us to raise that capital to do that because we're so heavily reliant on property taxes as a key source of revenue for us. So that's something that we'll continue to struggle with, but I think everyone is struggling with that across municipal sectors. I'll stop there, Peter, and do questions later, or?
We'll do some questions right
now. Okay.
But,
I'll give you the
mic. Very much.